The bitter Mongolian wind howled across the steppes, carrying with it the metallic scent of blood. I adjusted my night vision goggles, scanning the empty streets of what should have been a bustling village. My boots crunched against fresh snow, each step echoing in the unnatural silence that had settled over the area. The mission was supposed to be routine: investigate unusual electromagnetic disturbances reported by our satellite systems. Nothing in my years of military service could have prepared me for what we found. "Command, this is Whiskey 7, I whispered into my throat mic. "Village appears deserted. No signs of civilian activity." The static that crackled back through my earpiece carried an undertone of something else, a low, rhythmic humming that made my teeth ache. "I am Staff Sergeant Alex Ward, though that name doesn't appear in any official military database. As far as the world is concerned, I died 3 years ago in a classified operation in Eastern Europe. That mission had been my first encounter with things that shouldn't exist, with horrors that defied conventional military doctrine. It had also been my introduction to Unit 87, a classified division that operates in the shadows of every major military conflict, not fighting human enemies but something far worse. The first body we found was propped against the village well. Private Reynolds, the newest member of my team, barely managed to keep his composure. The victim's face was frozen in a mask of terror, eyes wide and mouth stretched in a silent scream. But it wasn't the expression that caught my attention. It was the intricate patterns carved into the flesh, symbols that seemed to writhe and shift in the green glow of our night vision. "Those markings," Lieutenant Cooper muttered, kneeling beside the body. "They're similar to the ones from the Budapest incident." She pulled out her specialized camera, designed to capture supernatural phenomena that regular equipment missed. The symbols pulsed faintly under the lens, emitting a frequency that made our equipment buzz. As we moved deeper into the village, the horror multiplied. Bodies lay scattered across the snow, each marked with the same twisted symbols. Men, women, children. The entity had shown no discrimination in its victims, but there was something methodical about their placement, a deliberate pattern that only became apparent when viewed from above using our drone footage. "Ward," Colonel Catherine Blake's voice cut through the static in my earpiece. She had been my handler since my recruitment into Unit 87, a stern yet maternal figure who seemed to know far more than she ever revealed. "The symbols match the Vicari archives. This isn't a random attack." The Vicari. Even after 3 years, the name sent shivers down my spine. An ancient order that had been fighting these battles long before modern militaries existed. They operated through secret societies and hidden enclaves. Their partnership with Unit 87 was tenuous at best, built on necessity rather than trust. They had knowledge we needed, and we had the resources they lacked. A flicker of movement caught my eye, drawing my attention to one of the larger buildings, the village's meeting hall. "Contact," I whispered, signaling my team to take positions. Through the thermal imaging, I could see a single heat signature moving erratically inside. "Approach with extreme caution," Blake ordered. "Remember Budapest." How could I forget? The sole survivor we'd found there had been possessed, turning on our extraction team with inhuman strength. 3 good soldiers lost their lives before we could contain the situation. We breached the building using standard CQB procedures, although experience had taught us that standard military tactics weren't always effective against supernatural threats. The interior was dark, the air heavy with the metallic stench of blood and something else, an ancient, musty odor that reminded me of sealed tombs. The survivor was a middle-aged man, probably the village elder based on his clothing. He stood in the center of the room, swaying slightly, his back turned to us. The floor around him was covered in elaborate patterns drawn in blood, symbols that matched those carved into the victims outside. "Sir," I called out in Mongolian, using the diplomatic approach protocol. "We're here to help. Are you injured?" The man's head snapped around with an unnatural motion, vertebrae cracking audibly. His eyes were solid black, reflecting our tactical lights like pools of oil. When he spoke, the voice wasn't human. It was layers of sounds, multiple tongues speaking in ancient languages simultaneously. The vessel awakens, the thing wearing the man's body said, lips peeling back to reveal blackened teeth. The Vicari chains weaken. Nerathis rises. Before any of us could react, the man's body began to convulse. The symbols on the floor pulsed with an eerie light, and a high-pitched whine filled the air, causing our equipment to malfunction. The man's flesh began to bubble and shift, as if something was trying to push its way out from inside. "Containment protocol," I shouted, reaching for the specialized equipment we carried for such situations. Lieutenant Cooper began the ancient binding words taught to us by the Vicari, while Reynolds and I moved to establish the containment circle. But we were too late. The man's body exploded outward, showering the room with corrupted flesh and blood. Where he had stood, a swirling vortex of darkness pulsed, tendrils of shadow reaching out like grasping fingers. Through my specialized goggles, I could see patterns in the chaos faces, screaming in agony, trying to push through from somewhere else. "Fall back," I ordered, activating the emergency beacon that would alert our rapid response team. This was beyond our capability to handle alone. As we retreated, I caught a glimpse of something emerging from the vortex, a form that defied description, a being of such ancient malevolence that my mind recoiled from its very existence. That was when my head exploded with visions, flashes of ancient battles, glimpses of rituals performed in forgotten temples, and a sense of overwhelming familiarity that I couldn't explain. For a moment, I could have sworn the entity looked directly at me, recognizing something in my blood, in my very DNA. The last thing I remembered before losing consciousness was Colonel Blake's voice, urgent and afraid. "It's happening. The prophecy was right. Nerathis has returned, and it's stronger than ever." When I came to in our mobile command center hours later, I learned that the village had been completely destroyed, erased from existence by protocols even I didn't have clearance to know about. But that wasn't what worried me. It was the symbols I had seen in my vision, the same ones now appearing as birthmarks across my chest, marking me as something more than just a soldier in a secret war. The hunt had begun, but I was no longer sure who was the hunter and who was the prey. The debriefing room at Unit 87's underground facility in Nevada felt impossibly small as I sat across from Master Thaddeus, his ancient eyes studying the newly formed markings on my chest. 3 years ago, when I first met this enigmatic Vicari scholar, I had mistaken his weathered appearance for fragility. That illusion shattered the day I watched him single-handedly subdue a possessed Special Forces operator using nothing but gestures and whispered words. "These markings," he murmured, his accent a curious blend of countless cultures. "They're mentioned in the Codex Obscura. The signs of recognition, they were called, not seen for over 3 millennia." His gnarled fingers traced the air above the symbols, and I felt them burn in response. The memories of my training under Master Thaddeus flooded back. I remembered my first day at the Vicari's hidden monastery in the Carpathian Mountains, where the line between military discipline and ancient mysticism blurred. The stone halls lined with artifacts that defied explanation, weapons that never needed reloading, armor that adapted to its wearer's fears, scrolls written in ink that moved on its own. "You told me there was something special about my blood," I said, watching his reaction carefully. "What aren't you telling me?" Thaddeus stood, his ceremonial robes whispering against the sterile floor. He approached a seemingly blank wall, pressed his palm against it, and whispered words that made my ears ring. The wall rippled like water, revealing a hidden chamber filled with rows of ancient texts and artifacts. "Your generation thinks history began with written records," he said, selecting a massive tome bound in what looked disturbingly like human skin. "But there were civilizations before civilization, powers before power." He opened the book, releasing the scent of age and secrets. The Vicari arose in response to entities like Nerathis, beings that existed before time as we know it. The pages he showed me contained illustrations that seemed to move in my peripheral vision, battles between forces that defied physics, rituals that reshaped reality itself. I recognized some of the symbols from the Mongolian village. During the 3rd dynasty of Thaddeus continued, Nerathis nearly succeeded in breaking through completely. The Vicari of that time developed weapons, tools, and rituals to fight back, but their greatest creation was the Bloodline program. My mouth went dry. A breeding program. More than that, a millennia-long effort to create perfect vessels, humans capable of channeling ancient powers without being consumed by them. Your parents weren't just Vicari scientists, Alex. They were the culmination of generations of careful genetic cultivation. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Is that why they died in that lab accident when I was a baby? Thaddeus's expression darkened. The official records lie. Your parents discovered something in their research, something that scared them enough to try to shut down the program. They gave their lives to protect you. He turned to a sealed container in the corner, unlocking it with a key that hung around his neck. Inside was a set of equipment I'd never seen before, combat gear that looked like a hybrid of modern military technology and ancient artifacts. This belonged to your father, Thaddeus said, lifting out a combat vest inscribed with glowing sigils, enhanced with Vicari craftsmanship. It responds to the wearer's bloodline. He handed it to me, and I felt a surge of energy the moment I touched it. The sigils pulsed in sync with my heartbeat. The incident in Mongolia wasn't random, he continued. Nerathis is drawn to power, specifically to those who can either aid or threaten its manifestation. It recognized you, Alex, just as you felt drawn to it. Training memories continued to surface, the countless hours spent learning to channel ancient energies, the painful process of building resistance to supernatural influences, the mind-bending task of memorizing protective sigils and incantations. But there had been more to it, things that now seemed suspicious in hindsight. The blood tests, the constant monitoring, the way certain Vicari elders would watch me with a mixture of hope and fear during training exercises. They had known what I was all along. Why tell me this now? I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. Because Nerathis's return was prophesied, yes, but there was more to the prophecy. Thaddeus turned to the final pages of the tome. It speaks of a vessel of two bloods, one ancient, one modern, a warrior born of both worlds capable of either sealing Nerathis away forever or becoming its greatest weapon. The implications were staggering. Every mission I'd been sent on, every supernatural threat I'd faced, they had all been tests, preparation for this moment. The marks on my chest weren't just symbols, they were a key to something bigger. A knock at the door interrupted us. Colonel Blake entered, her expression grim. We've got another incident. Similar signatures to Mongolia, but bigger. A whole town in Romania has gone dark. I stood, already reaching for the combat vest. How long until we deploy? 1 hour, Blake replied. But Alex, she hesitated, looking at Thaddeus. The signs we're seeing, they're forming a pattern, one that matches an ancient ritual circle. Whatever Nerathis is planning, it's happening faster than we anticipated. As I prepared for deployment, I caught my reflection in a darkened monitor. The symbols on my chest glowed faintly, pulsing like a beacon. Something was calling me, drawing me into a confrontation generations in the making. I just wasn't sure if I was meant to be humanity's savior or its downfall. The Romanian town of Campulung Moldovanescu lay shrouded in unnatural darkness when our team arrived. Even through the reinforced windows of our tactical vehicle, I could feel the wrongness emanating from the town square. The Vicari combat vest hummed against my skin, responding to the dark energies permeating the area. "You're 2 o'clock, Lieutenant Cooper whispered, her modified thermal scope revealing what normal sensors couldn't detect. We've got cold spots moving against the wind. A figure emerged from the shadows, a woman in her mid-30s, her dark hair streaked with premature gray, wearing tactical gear over what looked like academic clothing. Dr. Isabella Romano, the forensic archaeologist Unit 87 had recruited after she stumbled onto supernatural evidence at a dig site in Turkey. Her expertise in ancient death rituals had proven invaluable in understanding the patterns left behind by entities like Nerathis. "The victims are arranged differently here," she said without preamble, her Italian accent thickening with stress. "In Mongolia, they formed a summoning circle. Here, it's more like a constellation." She handed me a tablet showing drone footage of the area, bodies laid out in precise patterns, connecting points of mystical significance. "I recognize some of these alignments," I said, the knowledge surfacing from somewhere deep in my altered DNA. "They match stellar positions from over 10,000 years ago." Dr. Romano's eyes widened slightly. Exactly. When I carbon dated residue from similar sites in Asia, the samples showed temporal inconsistencies. It's as if something is trying to recreate an ancient celestial event. A scream cut through the night. High, desperate, and distinctly human. We moved toward it in practice formation, our boots silent on the cobblestone streets. The source led us to the town's monastery, a building that predated written records of the region. Inside, we found a young monk surrounded by the bodies of his brothers. He knelt in the center of elaborate patterns drawn in blood, swaying as he chanted in a language that made my teeth vibrate. The symbols on my chest burned in recognition. "That's impossible," Dr. Romano breathed, recording the scene with specialized equipment. He's speaking Proto-Sumerian, but with inflections that predate any known human language. The monk's head snapped toward us, eyes black as void. When he spoke again, it was with the same layered voices we'd heard in Mongolia. The vessel approaches, the blood awakens, his gaze fixed on me. "Brother." Before we could react, the monk's body began to transform, but unlike the violent explosion in Mongolia, this change was controlled, deliberate. His flesh rippled and reformed, taking on aspects of something ancient and inhuman. The blood patterns on the floor began to move, flowing up the walls and across the ceiling, forming a cage of eldritch energy around us. "Dr. Romano," I shouted, "the containment protocols." She pulled out a device that looked like a fusion of modern technology and ancient artifacts, her own design, combining archaeological knowledge with Vakari mysticism. As she began the containment sequence, I felt the symbols on my chest resonating with the energies she was channeling. The possessed monk launched himself at us with impossible speed, but my enhanced combat vest reacted instinctively, projecting a barrier of shimmering energy. The impact sent supernatural shockwaves through the chamber, shattering windows and crumbling centuries-old stone. "The pattern is completing itself," Dr. Romano called out, her devices projecting a holographic overlay of connected incident sites across Europe and Asia. Each attack is linked to ancient ley lines, but they're not just random points of power, they're forming some kind of key. The monk's transformed body slammed against my barrier again, and this time I felt something else. A connection, a resonance between whatever power flowed through his corrupted form and the ancient bloodline in my veins. Through that connection came flashes of understanding, other victims, other sites, all part of a larger design. He's not trying to break in, I realized, horror dawning. We're not containing him, he's containing us. The blood patterns on the walls began to pulse in rhythm with my heartbeat. Dr. Romano's equipment sparked and died, and Lieutenant Cooper's weapons jammed simultaneously. The monk's body began to dissolve, breaking down into a swirling mass of darkness and ancient symbols. The wheel turns, the voices spoke through the dissolving form. The stars align, the key awakens. The darkness coalesced into a sphere of pure void, hanging in the air before us. Choose your role, vessel, herald or adversary, but you will play your part. The sphere exploded outward, and with it came a wave of knowledge that brought me to my knees. I saw the pattern, really saw it for the first time. Each attack, each ritual site, was part of a vast, arcane mechanism. Nerathis wasn't just killing randomly, it was systematically unlocking something, using death and fear to turn an ancient key. When my vision cleared, the monk's body lay lifeless on the floor, the blood patterns had burned themselves into the stone, and Dr. Romano was helping me to my feet. Her face showed the same grim understanding I felt. "We've been looking at this wrong," she said, pulling up data from previous incidents. "These aren't just attacks, they're components of a larger ritual, one that's been in motion for thousands of years. The stellar alignments, the ley lines, the symbolic patterns, they're all pointing to something." "A doorway," I finished, the knowledge burning in my blood. "Nerathis isn't just trying to enter our world. It's trying to merge it with whatever realm it came from." I looked down at the symbols on my chest, now glowing bright enough to shine through my tactical gear, and somehow I meant to be the final key. Lieutenant Cooper's radio crackled to life with Colonel Blake's voice. "We're tracking similar energy signatures at multiple sites across Europe. Whatever's happening, it's accelerating." Dr. Romano gripped my arm, her expression intense. "Alex, the patterns I've been studying, the artifacts I've uncovered, They all speak of a cycle, a time when the barriers between worlds grow thin. If I'm right, we don't have months to stop this, we have days. As if confirming her words, the ground beneath us trembled, and in the distance, we could hear the sounds of reality starting to unravel. The streets of Prague's Old Town district echoed with screams as we pursued our target across rain-slicked cobblestones. 3 days had passed since the incident in Romania, and Nerathis' influence was spreading faster than we could contain it. The possessed victims were growing stronger, more organized, and worst of all, they were learning. Target heading toward Charles Bridge. Lieutenant Cooper's voice crackled through my earpiece. Local police have been diverted. We're clear to engage. I vaulted over a centuries-old stone wall, the Vicari combat vest amplifying my movements. The symbols on my chest burned with increasing intensity as we got closer to our quarry, a diplomat who'd murdered his entire security detail before fleeing into the night with classified defense documents. Be advised, Dr. Romano's voice cut in from her mobile command center. I'm picking up multiple electromagnetic anomalies converging on your location. The energy signatures match the ones from Romania, but they're more concentrated. A dark figure darted between Gothic spires ahead of me. The diplomat's movements were unnaturally fluid, his body contorting in ways that human joints shouldn't allow. As he ran, he left traces of darkness that seemed to eat away at the ancient stone buildings. All units, hold position, a new voice commanded. One I didn't recognize. A figure stepped out of the shadows ahead of me, wearing armor that seemed to absorb light. The insignia on their shoulder was one I'd never seen before, a broken circle containing an inverted eye. This is a sanctum operation now, the figure announced. Unit 87 is to stand down. The Sanctum. We'd heard whispers about them, a rival organization that claimed the Vicari were manipulating world events for their own ends. They operated with technology that seemed to counter supernatural forces, but their methods were brutal and their motives unclear. We have operational authority here, I started to say, but the Sanctum operator cut me off. Your authority ended when the Vicari lost control of their pet project, Vessel. The way they said Vessel made it clear they knew what I was. The Sanctum has contained entities like Nerathis before, without resorting to blood magic and genetic manipulation. Before I could respond, the possessed diplomat burst through a wall nearby, his body now a twisted mass of writhing shadows and exposed bone. The air around him rippled with dark energy, and I felt the symbols on my chest resonate painfully. The Sanctum operator raised a weapon that looked like a fusion of advanced technology and arcane artifacts. Target acquired, initiating purge protocol. Wait, I shouted. We need him alive for questioning. But the Sanctum operator had already fired. A beam of pure white energy lanced out, tearing through the possessed diplomat. Instead of killing him, however, the beam seemed to tear open reality itself around him. Through the rift, I caught glimpses of something vast and ancient, a realm of twisted geometries and impossible colors. The diplomat's body began to break apart, but as it did, it spoke in that same layered voice we'd heard before. The Sanctum's interference was foreseen. All paths lead to the awakening. Suddenly, every shadow in the area came alive. Dark tendrils lashed out, grabbing both Sanctum operatives and our own team members. I activated the protective sigils in my combat vest, creating a barrier of energy around myself and the nearest allies. Dr. Romano, I called through the comm. What are you seeing? The energy patterns are off the charts, she replied, her voice tense. It's like the incident in Romania, but the resonance frequencies are different. Alex, I think these attacks aren't just about killing, they're about testing defenses, learning our capabilities. The Sanctum operator's armor began to glow with white fire as they fought against the shadow tendrils. Fall back, deploy containment spheres. Small orbs of chrome and glass rolled across the ground, creating fields of anti-supernatural energy. The shadows recoiled, but I noticed something troubling. They were adapting, probing the fields for weaknesses. That's when the visions hit me again. Through my connection to whatever power flowed through my enhanced blood, I saw flashes of other battles. The Sanctum had faced Nerathis before, centuries ago, but there was something they didn't know, something the Vicari had kept hidden. "Your containment technology," I gasped, fighting through the psychic assault. "It's based on artifacts you found in Egypt, isn't it? Devices left behind by an ancient civilization." The Sanctum operator's helmet turned toward me sharply. "How do you know about that?" "Because they were meant to be found," I realized, the knowledge burning through my mind. "The artifacts, the technology, it's all part of the pattern. Nerathis isn't just growing stronger, it's making us fight among ourselves, forcing us to reveal our capabilities." Dr. Romano's voice came through urgently. "Alex is right. I'm analyzing the data from all recent engagements. Every time we use our most powerful containment methods, the next wave of possessed victims shows signs of adaptation. We're not just fighting Nerathis, we're teaching it." The possessed diplomat's body finally collapsed, but not before the shadows had thoroughly tested the Sanctum's containment technology. As the dark tendrils retreated, they left behind strange symbols burned into the stone, symbols that matched ones now appearing on my chest. "Your Vicari masters haven't told you everything, Vessel," the Sanctum operator said, their armor powering down. "Ask them about the first containment. Ask them what really happened to your parents." Before I could respond, they activated some kind of teleportation device and vanished, leaving behind only the faint scent of ozone and burning metal. Lieutenant Cooper approached, helping up our injured team members. "Sir, should we pursue?" I shook my head, studying the new symbols that had appeared alongside the original ones on my chest. "No, we need answers first." I activated my comm. "Colonel Blake, are you receiving?" "Affirmative," she replied. "The Sanctum's involvement complicates things. Return to base immediately. There's something you need to see." As we evacuated the area, I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. The shadows cast by the ancient buildings of Prague weren't falling quite right anymore, as if reality itself was beginning to unravel at the edges. Dr. Romano joined us in the extraction vehicle, her devices still recording data. "The energy patterns are changing. Whatever Nerathis is planning, we're running out of time." She looked at me with concern. "And Alex, the resonance between your blood and these events is growing stronger. We need to understand what you really are before it's too late." I looked down at my chest, where the glowing symbols seemed to pulse in time with a rhythm I couldn't quite hear, a beating heart of ancient power that was growing stronger with each passing moment. The underground facility in Nevada felt different when we returned from Prague. The familiar hum of containment fields was interrupted by irregular pulses, and the normally pristine white corridors showed signs of hastily repaired damage. Armed guards patrolled in pairs, their weapons loaded with specialized ammunition designed to work against both human and supernatural threats. Colonel Blake missed the last 3 check-ins, Lieutenant Cooper reported as we made our way to the command center. Her last known location was the Vicari archive room. Security footage went dark right after she accessed some kind of classified file. The archive room had been torn apart. Ancient texts lay scattered across the floor, their pages fluttering in the breeze from damaged ventilation ducts. The air smelled of burnt parchment and something else. A familiar musty odor that reminded me of the Mongolian village. Dr. Romano knelt beside a fallen shelf, her specialized scanner hovering over a dark stain on the floor. "This residue, it's similar to what we found in Romania, but there's something else mixed in, some kind of alchemical compound." I approached Blake's terminal, still active despite the chaos. The screen displayed fragments of documents I'd never seen before, research papers, field reports, and personnel files dating back decades. But it was a video file that caught my attention, its timestamp showing it was recorded just hours before Blake disappeared. The video showed Blake in her office, her normally composed demeanor shattered. "Alex, if you're seeing this, then they've already come for me. What I've discovered, it changes everything we thought we knew about Nerathis, about the Vicari, about you." She glanced nervously over her shoulder before continuing. "The breeding program wasn't meant to create warriors to fight Nerathis. It was meant to create a perfect host. Your parents found out the truth, that's why they tried to run. They weren't killed in a lab accident. They were eliminated by the same people who've been manipulating you your entire life." The video cut out abruptly, but not before I caught a glimpse of something moving in the shadows behind Blake. something with too many angles and eyes that glowed like dying stars. "This whole facility's compromised," Cooper said, checking the security feeds. "Half the cameras are down, and the ones that are working show gaps in the footage. We need to move." But Dr. Romano was focused on something else, a pattern emerging from the scattered documents. "These aren't random files," she said, her voice tense. "Look at the dates, the locations. Every major supernatural incident we've responded to was preceded by Vicari research expeditions in the same areas. They weren't containing these events, they were orchestrating them." The symbols on my chest flared with sudden heat, and with them came another vision, but this one was different. Instead of ancient battles or forgotten rituals, I saw recent events from a new perspective. The Vicari elders performing secret ceremonies in hidden chambers, Master Thaddeus speaking with shadowy figures in languages that hurt to hear, and Blake watching it all, gathering evidence. "We need to find Thaddeus," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "He's been at the center of this from the beginning." We made our way through the facility's lower levels, where the most dangerous artifacts were stored. The security systems were offline, and the containment fields around several vaults had failed. Inside one chamber, we found evidence of recent activity, ritual circles drawn in fresh blood, and in the center, a familiar figure. Master Thaddeus stood amidst the chaos, but he wasn't alone. The air around him writhed with half-formed shapes, and his eyes glowed with an inner light that made my enhanced blood burn in recognition. "I had hoped to complete the preparation before you discovered the truth," he said, his voice layered with others that echoed from somewhere beyond reality. "The Vicari have safeguarded these secrets for millennia, waiting for the perfect vessel to be born. Your parents' genetics were carefully selected over generations, their bloodline refined through ancient rituals and modern science." "Where's Colonel Blake?" I demanded, the combat vest humming with protective energy. "She learned too much, too quickly, Thaddeus gestured, and a shimmer in the air revealed Blake's unconscious form suspended in some kind of stasis field. "But her role isn't finished. The final ritual requires sacrifices of specific resonance frequencies. Her connection to you makes her blood particularly valuable." Dr. Romano's scanner began emitting urgent warnings. "Alex, the energy readings. They're identical to the ones we saw in Prague, but magnified exponentially. Whatever he's planning, it's happening now." Thaddeus raised his hands, and the shadows in the room began to coalesce into familiar patterns. "Nerathis isn't our enemy, Alex. It's our salvation. The world is dying, corrupted by humanity's ignorance. The merging of realms isn't an invasion, it's an ascension. Your blood, your very existence was engineered for this moment." The chamber began to transform around us, ancient stone revealing even older patterns beneath. The air grew thick with power, and I felt something vast and hungry pressing against the barriers of reality. "Your parents believed they were protecting you," Thaddeus continued, his form beginning to shift and change. "But they didn't understand the greater purpose. The Sanctum thinks they're preserving humanity, but they're only delaying the inevitable. You were born to be the bridge, Alex, the key that unlocks the door between worlds." Lieutenant Cooper raised her weapon, but invisible forces pinned her against the wall. Dr. Romano's equipment sparked and died as reality itself began to warp around us. Through my enhanced senses, I could feel the truth of Thaddeus's words, the resonance between my blood and the ancient powers he was channeling. But I also felt something else, resistance, the same defiance that had driven my parents to sacrifice everything to protect me. "You're right about one thing," I said, letting the power in my blood rise to the surface. "I am the key, but you forgot something important about keys." The symbols on my chest blazed with inner fire as I accessed abilities I never knew I had. They can lock doors just as easily as they can open them. The chamber erupted into chaos as ancient powers collided, and the true battle for humanity's future began. The battle with Thaddeus left the Nevada facility in ruins. Entire sections had collapsed, reality itself warped and twisted by the clash of ancient powers. As the dust settled, I stood in the wreckage of the ritual chamber, my enhanced blood burning with newfound abilities I was only beginning to understand. Lieutenant Cooper worked to free Colonel Blake from the stasis field while Dr. Romano's devices scanned for residual energy signatures. Thaddeus had escaped, not through any conventional means but by literally tearing a hole in space-time. The ragged edges of the breach still flickered with otherworldly energies. "Your vitals are off the charts," Dr. Romano said, pointing specialized equipment in my direction. "The energy you channeled during the fight, it's changed you at a molecular level. Your DNA is rewriting itself in real time." I looked down at my hands, watching as faint patterns of light coursed beneath my skin. The symbols on my chest had multiplied, spreading across my torso in intricate designs that pulsed with inner fire. Each beat sent waves of knowledge through my mind, fragments of memories that weren't my own. "He's gone to the Temple of the First Gate," Blake said weakly as Cooper helped her to her feet. "Peru. There's a facility there that predates known civilization. The Vicari didn't build it, they found it, just like they found me all those years ago." "What do you mean?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Blake's laugh was bitter. "You think you're the first attempt at creating a perfect vessel? The Vicari have been doing this for thousands of years. Most subjects died. Some went insane. A few, like me, survived but proved incompatible. You were different. Something in your genetic structure allowed you to accept the changes without breaking." Dr. Romano's scanner beeped urgently. She pulled up a holographic display showing a global map marked with pulsing points of supernatural energy. "The pattern is accelerating. Each site where Nerathis manifested is now acting as an anchor point, creating a geometric structure around the planet." "A cage," Blake said. "Or a net. The temple in Peru is the focal point where all the ley lines converge. Thaddeus isn't trying to stop Nerathis. He's trying to complete a ritual that was started thousands of years ago." I pressed my hand against one of the chamber's walls, and ancient knowledge flooded my consciousness. The stone held memories, echoes of countless rituals performed over centuries. I saw the truth about my parents, about their desperate attempt to prevent what they saw coming. "They were good people," Blake said softly, seeing the recognition in my eyes. "Your father was a brilliant geneticist, but it was your mother who first realized what the Vicari were really doing. She found evidence in the old texts, prophecies that had been deliberately mistranslated." "Show me," I said. Blake led us to a hidden vault that had survived the destruction, sealed with both modern technology and ancient wards. Inside, we found a laboratory that looked more like a temple. Genetic sequencers sat beside ritual altars. Glass tubes filled with glowing liquids lined the walls, each containing suspended forms that looked almost, but not quite, human. "Welcome to Project Ascendant," Blake said, gesturing to the facility, where science and sorcery were combined to create the perfect bridge between worlds. "Your parents worked here, trying to understand the changes happening in their own DNA. When they discovered they were pregnant with you, they also found this." She activated a computer terminal, bringing up images of ancient tablets covered in familiar symbols. Dr. Romano gasped. "These markings, they're not just a language, they're a genetic code written in ceremonial form. The Vicari weren't just recording history, they were recording the steps needed to modify human DNA. But modify it for what purpose?" Cooper asked, keeping her weapon ready as she scanned the shadows. Blake pulled up more files, research notes, genetic sequences, and ritual documentation spanning decades. "The Vicari believe humanity is a failed experiment. They think our realm is a corruption that needs to be purged and remade. Nerathis isn't their enemy, it's their salvation, a being of pure chaos that can unmake reality itself." "And I'm supposed to be the key," I said, the symbols on my chest burning with increasing intensity. "A being of both worlds who can open the way." "But that's not all you are," Dr. Romano interjected, her eyes wide as she studied her readings. "The genetic modifications, the ritual preparations, they're not just about creating a doorway. You're meant to be a prototype, the first of a new species that can survive in the merged reality they want to create." The room suddenly felt colder as the implications sank in. Through my enhanced senses, I could feel the weight of destiny pressing down, not just my own, but the collective fate of two realms hanging in the balance. "There's more," Blake said, her voice heavy. "The Sanctum. They're not what they appear to be either. They're remnants of an ancient civilization that faced this same crisis millennia ago. They're technological artifacts. They're weapons left behind as a last resort, meant to be found if Nerathis ever returned." A distant explosion rocked the facility. Emergency sirens blared as containment systems began to fail throughout the complex. On Dr. Romano's holographic display, the pattern of supernatural energy was shifting, concentrating around our location. "They're coming," Blake warned, grabbing essential data drives. "Thaddeus will have sent his most loyal followers to clean up loose ends. We need to move. The answers we need, the real truth about everything, it's all in Peru." As if in response to her words, the symbols on my chest flared with blinding light. In my mind's eye, I saw the Temple of the First Gate, a vast structure of impossible geometry built by hands that had never been human, and within its depths something stirred, calling to the power in my blood. "How long until Thaddeus completes the ritual?" Cooper asked as we prepared to evacuate. "The stellar alignment he needs happens in 3 days," Dr. Romano answered, checking her calculations. "When the geometric pattern is complete and the barriers between worlds are at their weakest." I looked at my team, a disgraced colonel, a brilliant archaeologist, and a loyal soldier, each carrying their own pieces of this cosmic puzzle. "Then we have 3 days to stop him, to understand what I really am and what I'm meant to do." The facility shuddered again as reality buckled under supernatural assault. Through the chaos, I felt something else awakening. Not just in me, but in the very fabric of our world. The true war was about to begin, and its outcome would determine far more than just humanity's fate. The Temple of the First Gate rose before us like a wound in reality itself. Built into the side of a mountain in the Peruvian Andes, its architecture defied conventional geometry angles that shouldn't exist, bent inward toward a central point that seemed to swallow light. Our helicopter's instruments failed as we approached, forcing Cooper to land us 2 miles out and continue on foot. "The dating analysis makes no sense," Dr. Romano said, studying her readings as we approached. "These stones, they're registering as both ancient and impossibly new at the same time. It's as if they exist in multiple temporal states simultaneously." The symbols on my chest resonated with increasing intensity as we got closer. Each step brought new waves of knowledge flooding through my consciousness. Memories of this place from countless different eras, seen through eyes that were never meant to exist in our reality. "The temple predates humanity," Blake explained, her own enhanced blood allowing her to sense some of what I felt. "The beings who built it, they weren't from our universe. They created these structures as anchor points, places where the barriers between realities could be strengthened or broken." I raised my hand, feeling the currents of power flowing through the air. The combat vest my father had created hummed in response, its protective sigils adapting to channel the strange energies. With my newfound abilities, I could see patterns in the flow, ley lines converging on the temple like rivers of light. "Someone's been here recently," Cooper noted, her tactical assessment cutting through the supernatural atmosphere. She pointed to fresh marks in the ancient stone, signs of modern equipment being moved through the narrow passages. "Thaddeus," I said, recognition flooding through me, "but he's not alone. The energy signatures, they're similar to what we saw in Prague." "The Sanctum," Blake confirmed. "They've been tracking him too. This is where it all converges, the place where both organizations began." We entered the temple through a portal that seemed to shift and change as we passed through it. The interior was a maze of corridors that folded back on themselves in impossible ways. Ancient symbols covered every surface, glowing faintly in response to our presence. Dr. Romano's hand brushed against one of the walls, and she jerked back with a gasp. "These aren't just decorative marks," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "They're mathematical equations written in a 4-dimensional alphabet. The entire temple is one massive formula for rewriting the laws of reality. As we moved deeper into the complex, I felt my powers growing stronger. The energy that had been awakening in my blood since Mongolia was reaching its full potential here, responding to the temple's alien architecture. I could feel the barriers between worlds thinning, catch glimpses of other realities bleeding through the cracks. "Look," Cooper called out, her light illuminating a vast chamber ahead, some kind of laboratory. The room was a fusion of ancient alien technology and modern equipment. Holographic displays flickered beside stone monoliths that pulsed with inner light. In the center stood a device that made my enhanced senses scream in recognition, a pillar of twisted metal and crystal that seemed to draw in all surrounding energy. "The convergence engine," Blake breathed. "The Vicari text spoke of it, but I never thought, this is what Thaddeus needs to complete the ritual." I approached the device, drawn by some deep recognition in my modified genes. As I got closer, the symbols on my chest began to glow brighter, matching patterns that appeared on the engine's surface. "Your parents studied this," Blake said softly. "They discovered that the original builders left it as a failsafe. It has the power to either strengthen the barriers between worlds or shatter them completely. The Vicari have spent millennia trying to understand how to activate it. And now they have me," I realized. "A key created through generations of genetic manipulation." Dr. Romano's equipment suddenly lit up with warnings. Multiple energy signatures approaching. Both Vicari and Sanctum signals converging on our location. Before we could react, the air itself seemed to tear open. Thaddeus stepped through the breach, his form now barely human. Behind him came Sanctum operatives in their light-absorbing armor, but something was wrong. Their movements were jerky, unnatural. "They're possessed," Cooper warned, raising her weapon. "Nerathis has them." "Of course it does," Thaddeus said, his voice resonating with otherworldly power. "Did you think the Sanctum's technology could protect them forever? Their artifacts were powerful, yes, but Nerathis has had millennia to learn how to corrupt them." I stepped forward, letting the power in my blood rise to the surface. The combat vest responded, channeling energy in ways its creators never intended. "You've lost your way, Thaddeus. The Vicari were meant to protect humanity, not destroy it." "Protect," he laughed, the sound echoing in frequencies that shouldn't exist. "We were meant to guide humanity toward its true destiny. This reality is a cosmic accident, a mistake that needs to be corrected. Your blood carries the formula for that correction." The possessed Sanctum operatives began to spread out, their armor crackling with corrupted energy. Through my enhanced senses, I could see Nerathis's influence spreading through the temple's ancient systems, trying to seize control of the convergence engine. But something else was happening too. The more I opened myself to the temple's power, the more I understood. The beings who built this place, who created the convergence engine, they hadn't just left behind weapons and warnings. They'd left behind knowledge, encoded in the very stones waiting for someone who could understand it. I felt my consciousness expanding, touching other realities, seeing the true scope of what we faced. And in that moment of clarity, I realized that neither the Vicari nor the Sanctum had understood the full truth. The choice before us wasn't just between preserving our world or letting it be destroyed. It was about something much bigger, a cosmic game where humanity's fate was just one piece on the board. Chapter 8: The Inner Circle. The battle in the temple's main chamber defied physics. Reality bent and warped around us as ancient powers clashed with corrupted modern technology. The possessed Sanctum operatives moved like broken puppets, their advanced armor crackling with dark energy as Nerathis worked through them. "The convergence engine is powering up," Dr. Romano called out, her devices struggling to make sense of the readings. "The energy pattern matches what we saw globally, but concentrated. It's like a lens focusing light." I channeled power through my father's combat vest, creating barriers of pure force as Thaddeus launched attacks that could shred normal matter. Each blast carried fragments of knowledge, memories, and secrets torn from the minds of countless victims over centuries. "You still don't understand what you truly are," Thaddeus said, his form shifting between human and something else entirely. "The Vicari Inner Circle has guided humanity's development for millennia. Every major technological breakthrough, every evolutionary leap, we orchestrated them all, preparing Earth for this moment." Through the chaos, I saw Cooper moving to higher ground, taking precise shots with specialized ammunition. Each round carried blessed metals and bound spirits capable of hurting even supernatural entities, but the possessed Sanctum operatives kept coming, their armor repairing itself with twisted geometries. "The Sanctum thought they could stop us," Thaddeus continued, gesturing toward his corrupted puppets. "They discovered traces of the ancient civilization, built weapons using fragments of their technology, but they never understood the truth. That civilization didn't fall, it ascended." Blake had worked her way around to the convergence engine, her own enhanced blood allowing her to interact with its alien controls. "Alex, the engine isn't just a doorway, it's a transformation matrix. The original builders used it to evolve beyond physical form." More memories flooded through me as my powers connected with the temple's systems. I saw the truth, countless civilizations rising and falling across multiple realities, each facing the same choice we now confronted. Some chose to fight, to preserve their existence as they knew it. Others embraced transformation, using devices like the convergence engine to transcend their original forms. The Inner Circle has spent thousands of years preparing humanity for ascension, Thaddeus revealed, his voice carrying the weight of ancient knowledge. "We guided the development of consciousness itself, cultivated bloodlines that could survive transformation. Your parents weren't just scientists, they were the culmination of generations of careful breeding. They saw what you really were," I shot back, deflecting another reality warping attack. "They tried to stop you because they understood the cost of what you're planning." "Cost?" Thaddeus laughed, the sound fracturing space around him. "Look at your world, Alex. War, poverty, environmental collapse. Humanity is a failed experiment, trapped in a cycle of self-destruction. Nerathis offers liberation from these physical constraints, a chance to evolve beyond the limitations of flesh and linear time." Dr. Romano's scanner suddenly emitted a piercing alarm. "The geometric pattern is complete. The ley line network is fully activated." The temple began to shake as power surged through ancient conduits. The convergence engine pulsed with blinding light, its crystalline components rotating in impossible directions. Through the temple's walls, I could see other realities pressing against the thinning barriers of our world. "Behold," Thaddeus commanded, raising his arms as reality itself began to tear, "the truth of the Inner Circle's purpose." The air split open, revealing a massive chamber hidden within the temple's impossible geometry. Inside, rows of crystalline pods lined the walls, each containing a suspended figure. I recognized some of them: missing Vicari elders, disappeared world leaders, brilliant scientists who had vanished over the years. "The first wave of ascended humanity," Thaddeus explained, pride in his inhuman voice. "Those deemed worthy to survive the transformation. When Nerathis fully manifests, their consciousness will be transferred into new forms, unbounded by physical laws." "And everyone else?" Cooper demanded, her weapon trained on Thaddeus's shifting form. "The billions of people you decided weren't worthy of evolution." "Raw material," he said simply. "Their physical and mental energy will fuel the transformation. Those who survive will be reborn as part of the new order." The knowledge crystallized in my mind. The true scope of the Inner Circle's plans, centuries in the making. Every supernatural incident we'd fought, every possessed victim we'd encountered, had been a test, not just of humanity's defenses, but of its potential for transformation. "That's why you needed me," I realized, the symbols on my chest blazing with understanding. A being of both worlds, capable of surviving the change while maintaining consciousness. A prototype for the new humanity you want to create. "Yes," Thaddeus exclaimed. "You are the bridge, the proof that controlled evolution is possible. Join us, Alex. Take your place among the ascended. Help us guide humanity toward its true destiny." But even as he spoke, I felt something else stirring within the temple's ancient systems. The beings who built this place hadn't just left behind technology. They'd left behind a warning, written in code that only someone with my unique genetics could understand. Through my enhanced senses, I saw the full truth of what ascension really meant. And I knew what I had to do. "Dr. Romano," I called out, never taking my eyes off Thaddeus. "The engines control crystals. What color are they turning?" She checked her readings. "Deep purple, almost black. Why?" "Because the original builders left a message in the core programming," I said, letting the knowledge flow through me, a truth that the inner circle never discovered. Thaddeus's form flickered, uncertainty crossing his features for the first time. "What are you talking about?" I met his gaze, the power in my blood reaching its peak. "They weren't trying to help us ascend, Thaddeus. They were trying to warn us about what happens when you try to force evolution, about the price of rushing transformation." The chamber erupted into chaos as the true endgame began. The convergence engine's crystals pulsed with dark energy as reality buckled around us. Through the tears in space-time, I could see the void where Nerathis waited, a realm of chaos and twisted consciousness that the inner circle had mistaken for enlightenment. "You're wrong," Thaddeus snarled, his form now more energy than matter. "The ancient builders achieved ascension. The evidence is written in the very stones of this temple." "No," I countered, letting the full knowledge flow through me. "They tried to ascend and failed. This temple isn't a gateway to evolution. It's a warning about the price of forcing transformation. The beings you worship as gods, they're the ones who couldn't turn back, trapped between states of existence. What you call ascension is actually an eternal torment." Dr. Romano's scanner confirmed my words as it decoded more of the temple's hidden messages. The purple-black coloration in the crystals, it's a warning sign. The same pattern appears in every civilization's records before their collapse. The possessed sanctum operatives suddenly convulsed, their armor cracking as Nerathis's influence grew stronger. Through the gaps, we could see their flesh transforming, taking on aspects of that other realm. They weren't evolving, they were being unmade. "The Sanctum knew part of the truth," Blake called out, her hands flying over the engine's controls. "That's why they created their containment technology, not just to fight beings like Nerathis, but to prevent their own people from trying to ascend." Cooper provided covering fire as more possessed operatives poured in through reality breaches. "The suspension pods," she shouted. "They're failing. Whatever's happening is affecting the stasis fields." She was right. The crystalline pods containing the inner circle's chosen ones were beginning to crack, their occupants showing signs of the same twisted transformation affecting the sanctum operatives. The ascension process wasn't giving them new, evolved forms. It was breaking down the barriers between flesh and void. "No," Thaddeus whispered, watching his carefully laid plans unravel. "We did everything right. The bloodlines, the preparations, the alignment of powers." His form flickered violently, parts of him shifting between dimensions as his own transformation accelerated. The knowledge left behind by the ancient builders flooded through my enhanced consciousness. I saw their civilization's final days, their desperate attempts to reverse the ascension process after discovering its true nature. The convergence engine hadn't been designed to open a door, it was meant to close one. My parents, I realized, the truth crystallizing. They found this warning in the genetic code itself. That's why the Vicari killed them. They were trying to prevent this moment. Dr. Romano's devices suddenly lit up with urgent warnings. "The dimensional barriers are collapsing. If we don't act now, both realms will merge completely." The symbols on my chest burned with blinding intensity as power surged through the temple's systems. Each mark contained part of a code, not just for transformation, but for its reversal. My blood carried both the key to open the door and the means to seal it forever. "The choice was never about whether to ascend," I said, letting the energy flow through me. "It was about whether we were wise enough to recognize our own limitations, to understand that true evolution can't be forced." Thaddeus launched himself at me with reality-warping force, but the combat vest my father designed responded to my newfound understanding. It wasn't just protective gear, it was a tool to channel the very power now coursing through my veins. The inner circle spent centuries trying to recreate the ancient builders' work, Blake shouted over the chaos. But they never understood the most important part. the failsafe hidden in the bloodline itself. The temple shuddered as temporal energies reached their peak. Through the void tears, I could feel Nerathis pushing against the weakening barriers, its consciousness vast and hungry, but I could also sense something else, the trapped fragments of those who had tried to ascend before, their tormented forms reaching out in warning. "Cooper, Romano," I called out. "Get to the engine's control pylons. Blake, begin the containment sequence." As they moved into position, I faced Thaddeus and his possessed forces. The power in my blood had reached its full potential, burning away the last barriers between knowledge and action. I understood now why I had been born, why my genetics had been crafted across generations. Not to open the door, but to close it permanently. "You would doom humanity to remain trapped in flesh," Thaddeus raged, his form becoming increasingly chaotic. "Deny us our destiny among the ascended." "No," I replied, channeling power through the symbols that covered my body. "I'm giving humanity the chance to evolve on its own terms, to grow naturally, not through forced transformation." The convergence engine's crystals began to shift from purple-black to a deep blue as I initiated the true sequence, the one hidden in my very DNA. Energy coursed through the ancient machinery, but instead of tearing reality apart, it began to stitch it back together. "The pods," Dr. Romano shouted. "The stasis field is reversing. It's pulling the transformed ones back." "No," Thaddeus tried to interfere, but Blake activated a containment field, trapping him in a matrix of ancient and modern power. "You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand perfectly," I said, letting the last of the hidden knowledge flow through me. "The original builders left us a choice, not between evolution and stagnation, but between patience and destruction. Real transformation takes time, earned through wisdom and natural development." The temple's power reached its crescendo. Through my enhanced senses, I could feel reality beginning to stabilize, the tears sealing themselves as Nerathis's influence was pushed back. But the cost would be high. "Alex," Blake called out urgently, "the reversal process, it requires an anchor point, someone with the right genetic structure to maintain the seal." "I know," I replied calmly, having seen this moment in the builder's memories. "That's what I was really created for, not to open the door, but to become the lock." Cooper tried to protest, but there wasn't time. The transformed sanctum operatives were being restored, pulled back from the brink of unmaking. The suspension pods cleared as their occupants were returned to normal. The ascension process reversed. Reality itself seemed to exhale as the barriers between worlds strengthened. Thaddeus screamed in fury and despair as his own transformation reversed, the knowledge and power he had accumulated over centuries burning away. "You're throwing away humanity's only chance at transcendence." "No," I said, taking my place at the engine's core as the final sequence began. "I'm giving humanity the chance to find its own path to the stars." The last thing I saw before the light took me was Dr. Romano's face, understanding and grief mingling in her eyes as she realized what my sacrifice meant. Lieutenant Cooper stood at attention, offering a final salute, and Colonel Blake, her own enhanced blood resonating with the power flowing through the temple, nodded in acceptance of the choice I had made. The convergence engine pulsed one final time, and I felt my consciousness expand, not in ascension, but in protection. My body dissolved into pure energy, becoming one with the ancient machinery, strengthening the barriers between worlds. I would exist outside of time, neither alive nor dead, maintaining the seal that protected humanity from forces it wasn't yet ready to face. As my physical form faded, I sent out one last pulse of power, erasing the dangerous knowledge from the minds of those who would misuse it. The inner circle's secret archives crumbled to dust, their carefully gathered data about ascension scattering to the winds of time. Humanity would evolve, yes, but at its own pace, in its own way, and I would watch, a guardian at the threshold between realities, until the day our species truly was ready to understand the mysteries that lay beyond the veil of existence. The last thing I heard was Dr. Romano's voice, recording the truth for those who would come after. The greatest power isn't in forcing change, but in having the wisdom to know when to let things unfold naturally. Alex Ward didn't just save humanity, he gave us back our future. The temple of the first gate still stands in the Peruvian mountains, though few can find it now. The Vakari have been reformed, their purpose shifted from pursuing ascension to protecting humanity's natural development. The sanctum continues its work, using what remains of the ancient technology to defend against supernatural threats. Dr. Isabella Romano leads a new research division, studying the messages left behind by the original builders, not to recreate their mistakes, but to learn from their wisdom. Lieutenant Cooper commands Unit 87, its mission now focused on preserving the balance between worlds. And sometimes, when the barriers between realities grow thin, those with the right kind of perception might catch a glimpse of something watching over our world. A consciousness spread across the threshold between dimensions, neither human nor divine, protecting humanity's long journey toward its true destiny. The marks that once covered my chest now form part of the eternal lattice that separates order from chaos. A reminder that the greatest sacrifices are those made not for power or glory, but for the simple preservation of hope. In the end, that's what set humanity apart from those who tried to force evolution. Our ability to understand that true transcendence comes not from escaping our nature, but from embracing it, growing through our struggles rather than trying to bypass them. The ancient evil still exists, waiting beyond the veil, but it will find no purchase in our reality. The door is closed, the key transformed into an eternal lock, and humanity is free to forge its own path among the stars.